Hi, I'm Doug Boynton. You're listening to WHRO's Weekly Edition, where we highlight the week's news and stories happening in our area. In this week's program, tourism is alive and well in Virginia Beach. The industry generated $3.8 billion last year. We'll break down the numbers. A former Norfolk delegate is seeking the Democratic nomination for Attorney General, and a Suffolk nonprofit is looking for help to reduce pollution in the Nansemond River.
When the river isn't doing good, then our natural world around us is not going to be as efficient and doing as well for us. We could do it in smarter ways and live with nature instead of against it.
It's WHRO's Weekly Edition. Since the colonial era, the Great Dismal Swamp has put 50 million metric tons of carbon dioxide into the environment. WHRO's Catherine Hafner puts that in context.
The Great Dismal Swamp once covered more than 1 million acres. When George Washington's timber company showed up in 1763, they saw a huge business opportunity.
They used the cypress and juniper trees for shingles. And so all of those trees were essentially cut down in the swamp.
That's geologist Miriam Jones with the U.S. Geological Survey. She says colonists drained the swamp for farmland. Lots of peat or bog has been lost. As the peat dwindles, it releases carbon into the atmosphere. Jones says the amount researchers calculated is like running 15% of the country's cars for a year.
Maybe in the grand scheme of things, that doesn't sound that great, but when you put the land use change of wetlands all together across the country or even across the world is a very large change.
That makes it a rising source of greenhouse gases, fueling global warming. Catherine Hafner, WHRO News.
Tourists are a $3.8 billion big deal to Virginia Beach. WHRO's Ryan Murphy digs into the numbers.
More than 14 million people visited Virginia Beach in 2023 and spent more than $7 million a day, according to consultant Tourism Economics. Visitors spent $1.1 billion on food and drinks alone over the course of the year. The number of tourists and how much they spent increased over 2022. The combination of direct spending and activity that resulted from that added up to a regional economic impact of $3.8 billion. The report says 19% of the city's workforce, nearly 34,000 jobs, are tied to the tourism industry. Ryan Murphy, WHRO News.
Governor Glenn Youngkin was in town this week to launch a new online resource for Virginia's veterans. WHRO's Sienna Morales has more on the Virginia Veterans Network.
Youngkin made the announcement at the Hampton Roads Council of Veterans Organizations annual Veterans Day luncheon in Virginia Beach. The project is intended to connect users with a broad network of resources. It centralizes information from hundreds of organizations, offering access to federal, state, and local benefits and programs. The network is designed to simplify appointment scheduling with the Department of Veterans Services and provide guidance on available support through various life stages. Youngkin says VVN plays a role in recognizing the service and sacrifices of Virginia's veterans while ensuring they and their families receive the resources they've earned. Sienna Morales, WHRO News.
A Hampton pastor wants to replicate his resource center and partnerships around the Commonwealth. Think of it as a social services marketplace. Why? WHRO's Nick McNamara reported the story.
Kingdom United Fellowship pastor Charles Cheek hosted a group of faith leaders and officials, giving them a look at how its Marketplace Resource Center works.
But we know it's a workable model that can go statewide.
The center opened in early 2023. It provides numerous social services out of its location near Buckrow Beach. It also attracted a partnership with the Department of Juvenile Justice, which connects young people with the center's services as part of a post-release mentorship program. Cheek says the partnership has changed lives in its first year. He hopes faith leaders will borrow the model in their communities and spread the work to help young people leaving the justice system find new paths. Nick McNamara, WHRO News.
Boxer Keyshawn Davis put the fight back in Norfolk last Friday night. It was the first time in decades that Hampton Roads witnessed one of its own stepping into the ring and dominating. WHRO's Lisa Godley takes us there.
Professional boxer Keyshawn Davis promised his hometown that he would deliver, and that's exactly what he did. Keyshawn's second-round knockout of Gustavo Lemos brought the sold-out crowd packing the Norfolk Scope to its feet.
He kept jumping in, so once I got my rhythm, got my distance, I just let that jump go. It was just a reaction. I didn't put no power behind it. I didn't load up. It just came and hit him right on the chin, and he went down. Honestly, when I dropped him the first time, it was over. I already knew it was over, and I just closed the show.
The entire night was truly a moment for the Davis family. Keyshawn's brothers, Kelvin and Keon, fought on the undercard, and both won their bouts. And his sisters wowed spectators when they sang the national anthem. This was the first major event for the Davis brothers, also known as DB3, and Keyshawn said he could feel the love.
Y'all really love DB3, man. After a night like this, it's going to be even more people behind us. So just know it started right here in Norfolk at the Scope.
For your winner by knockout from Norfolk, Virginia, Keyshawn Davis!
For WHRO News, I'm Lisa Godley.
Still ahead on Weekly Edition, Virginia Opera celebrated its 50th season with a production of Carmen. We'll hear how the VA is checking on veterans still impacted by Hurricane Helene in western North Carolina. But first, Williamsburg is seeking residents' input on a narrative draft for its planned African American Heritage Trail. WHRO's Nick McNamara reports.
A 16-page draft of the narrative weaves together the stories of area residents, connecting personal stories about notable places, people, and moments shared by the Black community in and around the city. The trail is intended to lead people on a 2-mile path through downtown Williamsburg to share the often or undertold history of African Americans in the area. Marketing firm JMI has been working to develop the narrative for the trail since Williamsburg officially launched the project in June. It collected the stories of 50 different Williamsburg residents through an online platform and a series of public conversations to craft the draft storyline. You can read and submit input on the draft at williamsburgva.gov/heritage trail. The survey closes November 15th. Nick McNamara, WHRO News.
Keep your eyes peeled next spring as the Dome, not that one, the new Dome in Virginia Beach plans to open. WHRO's Sienna Morales has more.
The Dome is the amphitheater-style concert hall associated with the Atlantic Park development at the oceanfront. The name comes from the iconic dome-shaped Allen B. Shepard Convention Center built in 1958 that used to be at 19th and Pacific Avenues. The venue famously hosted acts like Louis Armstrong, the Rolling Stones, Jimi Hendrix, and many more before it closed in 1993. Now, the site is being redeveloped by a group headed by music superstar and beach local Pharrell Williams into a surf park and events venue with apartments, businesses, and restaurants. The Dome will have a capacity of up to 5,000 people and will host 100 events per year, the city says. Sienna Morales, WHRO News.
Former Norfolk delegate Jay Jones said Tuesday he will seek the Democratic nomination for Virginia Attorney General next year. The story came from WHRO's Barry Graham.
Jay Jones was first elected to the House of Delegates in 2017. After winning a third term in 2021, he stepped down later that year with the announcement that he and his wife were expecting their first child. Jones was born into a politically active family. His father, Gerard Jones, served in the House of Delegates from 1988 until 2002. Jones previously sought the nomination in 2021, but failed against then-incumbent Mark Herring. Virginia holds elections next year for governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general. Barry Graham, WHRO News.
The United States has nearly 200 ambassadors in other countries, and when a new president takes office, some will likely be replaced. One of them is a Virginia man with a remarkable story to tell. Virginia Public Radio's Sandy Hausman spoke with him. She filed this report.
In June, Arthur Brown was finally welcomed as U.S. Ambassador to Ecuador. Flanked by a dozen officers in red, white, and blue uniforms with gold braid, he walked the red carpet to present his credentials. He'd waited 20 months for Senate confirmation after serving in 14 other countries. This job was the culmination of a fascinating career that began on a dirt road east of Charlottesville.
Route 616, which is Black Cat Road. If you pass the first church on your left, there's a little dirt road. I lived down in that holler.
Brown's grandparents had been farmers. His parents were raised in the Jim Crow era and suffered through mass resistance when Virginia closed its public schools rather than integrate them. Arthur grew up in a different time. He played football at Albemarle High School, took a field trip to the General Assembly, saw New York as part of the Model United Nations program, and was set on a career in foreign service. There was, he recalls, just one problem: a rejection letter from the University of Virginia. With encouragement from his father, Arthur reached out to the director of admissions.
Called him out of the telephone pages, and I told him that the university had made a mistake by not accepting me. He was like, "Who is this?" And I'm like, "I need to come see you. We got to talk." I thought that someone had to hear my story, and he allowed me to come in.
His story was simple. He had excelled in social studies, but didn't do well in math.
My grades demonstrated real academic prowess in sociology, history, government. But then with the quantitative stuff, like I wasn't super strong. And if I've got to take a math class or stats class or whatever, I'll do that. But there's no doubt that I have what it takes to succeed at the university.
He had dressed for success in khakis, a blue blazer, orange and blue tie, and a pair of tasseled loafers.
So, I had the uniform.
And the director of admissions was intrigued.
He asked me, if you don't get into school, what are you going to do? And I was like, I'm going to Parris Island, going to the Marine Corps.
That's when John Blackburn decided to give him a chance. Brown washed dishes and drove a campus bus to pay his expenses, played sports and double majored in sociology and African American studies. He joined a fraternity and, armed with a degree from UVA, entered the Peace Corps, serving in Togo and Benin. He went on to the Foreign Service, learned French and Spanish, served in other parts of Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean. Wherever he went, Brown says, people were surprised.
I'm turning heads because, let's face it, I'm a Black American male. A lot of people don't get a chance to meet an American that fits my background. I'm an anomaly. And that's okay.
He hopes he might stay on in Ecuador, where the reception has been especially warm.
They call it cariño. It's just a welcoming, a hospitality.
But the country is caught between Colombia and Peru in a regional struggle with drug trafficking and terrorism.
Ecuador's geography has it sandwiched between two major cocaine transporters and producers. And because Ecuador has a U.S. dollar economy, it's really easy for drug trafficking organizations to launder money and corrupt every institution of order and security.
Whatever happens professionally, Arthur Brown plans to stay in public service. He might return to the Piedmont and run for office.
You never know. I may have to come back to the 5th District and shake things up a little bit. Who knows?
And over the holidays, he'll be back in Virginia to visit several universities and encourage students to consider a career in foreign service.
Our young folk matter. I want to be replaced by good people, so you got to influence them. You got to help them.
In Charlottesville, I'm Sandy Hausman.
The Hampton Roads Housing Consortium awarded the outgoing leader of Habitat for Humanity's Peninsula Chapter a Lifetime Achievement Award. WHRO's Nick McNamara reports.
The award recognizes CEO Janet Green's work, leading Habitat for Humanity of the Peninsula and Greater Williamsburg for more than 20 years. At the consortium's housing awards ceremony, Green said she had a lot of help along the way. She says the award recognizes not just her journey, but also the dedication of all of Habitat's staff, volunteers, donors, and partners. Green is retiring from Habitat at the end of the year. Nick McNamara, WHRO News.
Nansemond River's pollution levels are a growing concern. A nonprofit in Suffolk is doing something about it, and they're encouraging others to join them. WHRO's Catherine Hafner has more.
The Nansemond River has long supported people in Suffolk, like watermen and local indigenous tribes. But these days, half of the river is considered too polluted for fishing or swimming.
And that should send a red flag to all of us, because when the river isn't doing good, then our natural world around us is not going to be as efficient and doing as well for us.
That's Beth Cross, head of the Nansemond River Preservation Alliance. They want to connect the city's growing number of residents with the river.
There's going to be a continual growth in our city, but we don't have to do it like we've always done. We could do it in smarter ways and live with nature instead of against it.
Cross says the new Suffolk Nature Project is meant to inspire people to take action, like planting native species in their backyard. Catherine Hafner, WHRO News.
Virginia Opera celebrated its 50th season with a traditional production of the show Carmen earlier this month. The first time in 10 years it was performed at the Harrison Opera House. Kate Nowak reports for WHRO.
A story about a soldier falling into unrequited love, Carmen brings the world of classical opera and psychological thrillers together with a recognizable soundtrack featuring a Spanish-inspired French composition. Virginia Opera's artistic director and chief conductor Adam Turner says the traditional aesthetic invites the audience into another time.
It invites you into a world where you can unplug and maybe kind of reclaim some of that silence and stillness and appreciation for some of the finer things.
Turner says Carmen is arguably Virginia Opera's largest production since COVID impacted production and performance schedules. Carmen opened in Norfolk earlier this month. The show will travel to Fairfax for performances the weekend of November 16th and Richmond the weekend of November 22nd. Kate Nowak, WHRO News.
This is WHRO's Weekly Edition. Remember, for any stories you've missed, you can visit us on the WHRO smartphone app or all social media platforms.
Hardly a surprise, fares are going up at the downtown and midtown tunnels next year. WHRO's Ryan Murphy reported the story.
Drivers will pay anywhere from 3.5% to 5.5% more per trip through the tunnels between Portsmouth and Norfolk. That amounts to between 8 and 32 cents more per toll. Exactly how much depends on the time of day, since rates go up during peak traffic, as well as vehicle weight and whether you're paying with an Easy Pass. Toll rates at the two tunnels have gone up annually since they opened in 2014. It's part of the deal the state struck with the companies that built the new tunnels. Ryan Murphy, WHRO News.
The Navy dedicated a new memorial at Joint Base Little Creek, Fort Story. WHRO military reporter Steve Walsh says it honors Special Operations sailors.
The granite arch reads, "Protector First, Warrior Always." It honors the 83 explosive ordnance disposal technicians and Navy divers who died in the line of duty since 1942. The memorial was recently dedicated on the grounds of EOD Group 2 at Joint Base Little Creek, Fort Story in Virginia Beach. The Naval Special Operations Foundation has been working on the idea for nearly a decade. Construction began in 2022. Bronze relief statues were created by Josh King, the brother of an EOD veteran. More than 600 people attended the dedication ceremony, including Gold Star families of sailors who died over the years. Rear Admiral Bradley Andros, commander of Navy Expeditionary Combat Command, called the memorial a testament to the courage and sacrifice of our men and women. Steve Walsh, WHRO News.
More than a month after Helene, the VA is still sending teams out to check on thousands of military veterans in western North Carolina. Many have serious health problems, have trouble getting around, and are isolated. Jay Price of the American Homefront Project went out with one of the teams.
76-year-old Vietnam vet Cliff Stewart, everybody calls him Sarge, lives in the community of Swannanoa, just across the river from the devastated commercial district. Stewart has back and knee issues and uses a powered wheelchair. Like everyone else here, the flood caught him by surprise.
The water started coming down this way, and then the next thing I know, it's already above the windshield of the car.
It came in under his doors and welled up from the heating vents. VA nurse Matthew Bain had visited before.
Because the water was about, 2-3 feet in there?
It's 2 to 3 feet, yeah. It was just above the wheels on my wheelchair there.
His power still hadn't been reconnected. A small generator rattling out on the porch was mainly powering space heaters. A nonprofit company rebuilding his home has cut out much of the drywall and yanked out the insulation so the structure can dry out. A charity gave him a motorhome to live in temporarily, but his wheelchair won't fit in the door and Stewart has to leave it outside, so the VA team brought a weatherproof cover to protect it.
You can go there during the day, be out of the elements while they're in here gutting this place out.
With Bain were another nurse, Sherry Bird, and a driver, Garth Massey, to deal with the back roads that were rugged even before the storm chewed them apart. 3-person teams like this have been crisscrossing the mountains since Helene hit. After the storm, the VA put together a list of more than 2,600 veterans in the region at high risk because of serious health issues. Communications initially were almost impossible, and sometimes the VA couldn't reach them or their families. Patty Campbell, the chief nurse leading the VA outreach, said that left one alternative.
If we couldn't reach them by phone and we didn't hear from them on the email, and we had clinical staff in the vehicles going out.
It didn't always work. Sometimes the veteran was just unreachable. Other times,
some of the areas where we went to on the addresses, the home wasn't there.
The VA staff has had to care for veterans while dealing with their own storm-related struggles. Bain was without power for 15 days, but he said others had it worse.
We've got a couple of nurses we work with in primary care that have lost their homes completely, that were just a total loss. Some of our staff have lost family members, some people have lost homes, some people lost nothing. Just like Western North Carolina, it's a gambit of everything.
Among the vets Bain's team had to reach was a hospice patient who was cut off when a bridge to his house washed away.
Me and another nurse had to walk in water, food and supplies and backpacks about 2 miles in just to get him supplies. He had no medicines. They had no electricity. So, I mean, he was pretty much just at our whim of what we had, we could give him.
Many of those getting visits are in wheelchairs, like 50-year-old Donald Harris. Harris has multiple sclerosis and lives with his brother high up a mountain. A huge mudslide ripped right past their house, miraculously missing it, but destroying their steep quarter-mile dirt driveway. He was evacuated by a military helicopter. The terrain was too steep for it to land, so he was lifted out of his yard in a metal basket. He's only recently returned home to a shattered community where 13 of his neighbors died in the storm. Harris was in the shower when the team arrived, so they had to wait before he rolled out onto the porch.
Hey, Mr. Harris. How's it going? Good, brother. We didn't want to mix up your bath.
The VA team checked his medicine, the condition of his legs, talked with him about how the VA could make his bathroom more accessible, then said goodbye. For now.
Sure, I'll see you again. I'll be back again, I'm sure.
Then they loaded up and picked their way carefully back down the mountain. I'm Jay Price reporting.
You've been listening to WHRO's Weekly Edition. We had help today from Nick McNamara, Sienna Morales, Ryan Murphy, Steve Walsh, Kate Nowak, Catherine Hafner, Lisa Godley, and Barry Graham. Virginia Public Radio's Sandy Hausman and Jay Price with the American Homefront Project. Thanks as always to Connor Worley, who produced today's show. A reminder, you can always catch full episodes on the Weekly Edition podcast feed. You can get your news updates at WHRO.org, the WHRO smartphone app, and the WHRO Reports podcast feed. For all of us at WHRO and WHRV, I'm Doug Boynton. Stay safe. Be well.